that could be used.
Hey, did you see that email I sent you from Pete?
Why should we pay for something?
Gonzalez? Yesterday, I think. It was basically him saying, I don't think I want to do the swap. Well, he's got a question there about could we, I think is what you were asking, could we split this? I'm like, I don't think so. I'll send it. Yeah. Yeah, that's the one.
You been busy? Yeah.
I just didn't realize I didn't get a chance to ask you about that again.
Recording in progress.
Yeah. It's just we keep moving this deal around and it's fine, but things get shifted and it's hard to keep it. I'm gonna do the cold weather first and you guys all back.
Let's do that. Yeah. Leon, are you ready?
I'm ready. We're recording.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you'd please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call for the record. Mayor Lindsay,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Howe,
Here.
Councilor Crane,
Here.
Councilor Weeks,
Here.
and Councilor Humbert.
Here.
We have a quorum. You may proceed.
At this time, I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda with the switching of item B and A, item B being first, item A being second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
With that, we'll move on to what was labeled item B, discussion on cold weather impact to water lines. Director Epler.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, Clerk Strickland. Wanted to give an update on what the Water Department has been experiencing over the last week. As many of you know, we experienced some pretty low temperatures last week. Along with this, throughout the winter, we've experienced some pretty unique weather patterns, I guess is the nicest way to describe it. Lack of snow and rapidly rising and dropping temperatures. I think the temperatures have caused frost line to go deeper than normal, and lack of snow. We have places where we're experiencing freezes that this time last year had 7 feet of snow on them, and now they're just a few inches. As of today, and actually as of about 15 minutes ago, we're up to 54 calls for loss of water service. Okay. And I say just a few minutes ago we got 3 more, and I believe that puts us with 4 left on the list. Water crew is here because I wanted to, before I go into detail of what we're experiencing, I know y'all have heard me talk a lot about these gentlemen here. I wanted you to see their faces and talk a little bit. about what they've accomplished, not just in the last week, but really over the last year. I think is an absolute change in work culture in the water department because of this crew I have sitting behind me. I do want to say that you know, through the summer, as I've discussed, they've addressed water loss issues, water leaks that have been ongoing for quite some time, and have made a significant impact on our water loss. They've pushed hard with a good plan to improve some of our components and utilize our SCADA system to become much more efficient, much more effective. And I've got to say they, I don't know how they do it, but they do it with a smile on their face. We've had experiences with some pretty significant crises, from sewer main breaks, water main breaks, all the leaks, so many challenges. And to date, they have had over 700 service calls. And that's what we have on the books. This doesn't include what they see, you know, passing by and address, or people waving them down. And these are service calls that have been logged through our system, okay? On any given day, the field crew has 4 people, okay? It's tremendous, you know, over the course of the last week, they've responded to over 70 service calls, okay? Some have been able to be addressed in less than an hour, some take a whole day. And as you can imagine, the conditions that they addressed these issues in last week were somewhat demanding, particularly Tuesday when it was 32 below zero. I do, you know, just want to real quick introduce them to you. This is Jack Crandall, Evan Trejo Archuleta, Andrew Sanchez, Logan Folks. One other member of the team that isn't here, Nathan Gopium, has been a major player also. I do want to point out that Andrew Sanchez is our new meter reader also, and yet he was out all weekend with the crew in the snow. He's integrating in with the water department team, and really has been a great addition to the water department. To go into a little more detail on the challenges that we're encountering, sadly I have to report that some of these issues are associated with the new meter swaps. And not so much with the new meters, but the lack of quality control or quality assurance in their installation process. Should be known that we've found different scenarios where once the new meter was replaced, the meter setter was not placed down in the can. Essentially, in each of these meter cans, there's what we call the coil. This allows you to pull the meter setup up to where you can work on it, and then when you're done, you can push it back down to the bottom of the meter. In leaving these up within the frost line, a number of them froze, okay? There's also some issues with how insulation was reinstalled. You should know that I had a call with Sustainability Partners. They assure us that they will reimburse us for all of our time, expenses, equipment time, labor, materials, everything associated with this. They assured me that they are going to do everything to make it right. Now, to back up a little bit more, when this crisis started to show its ugly face weekend before last, and it was pretty easy to identify right away that there were some installation quality control issues. And as opposed to sitting back and doing nothing, we felt compelled to get some people out in the field and literally start popping lids and inspecting meters, okay? I'm happy to say that we had people from other departments jump in to help us with this enthusiastically. We had staff from the maintenance department. We had guys from the streets department team up with members of the water department team and go around and start popping lids and making sure stuff was down where it needed to be. as you all know, we have a lot of meters, but they've, last report was they've inspected 415 of them at this point, and had discovered some that had some installation issues, and they've been addressing those as they go along. I had them carrying insulation, adding insulation, trying everything that we could do. The other thing we did from the beginning is we reached out to all of the home care services, property management companies, to give them a heads up. Okay, we've got an issue out there. And what we asked them to do is check their units before people came in and give us a heads up. And what this, and I think it really helped us be successful, because people were able to discover some of these frozen meters well ahead of the time that their guests were arriving, and give us days when they were coming in, and Evan was able to plan and schedule the work around those schedules. And like I said, we're down to, we have 4 active service calls right now. 3 of them just came in, and at no point have these guys been way behind with the big list ahead of them. And I can't say enough good things about them. Evan is our field supervisor, and has just got a great team around him. And you know, on behalf of all the citizens, I just want to say thank you guys.
Thank you, guys.
With that, I think I would go ahead and open it up to any questions.
Director Edler, I have a question. About how many of these were meter related and how many were frozen between the meter and the homes?
There were some instances of where essentially a problem wasn't on our side. It's probably 10%.
So the majority are the meter swap issue?
Yes, sir. And we are well aware of the fact that there are some out there we don't know about because people haven't come in yet.
Can you say how many you've addressed in addition to the ones that reported? In other words, when you're popping lids and looking, I mean, how many, do you have a figure?
Yes, I do. Now understand that, you know, in identifying what needed to be addressed, there's 2 main elements to this: making sure that the meter is all the way down in the can, and making sure that insulation was installed. So of this number, there were some that the meter wasn't all the way down, some maybe the insulation wasn't right. Not necessarily frozen, but they had an issue. Sadly, out of the 415, there were 117 that had one issue or another.
I guess too, with these new meters, that they'll detect a trend where maybe they're using more water, and that triggers, I guess, after 24 hours maybe, that
Well, the
there
thing
may
is,
be a leak, but
Yeah.
not a frozen.
yeah,
I guess,
the
right?
thing is, when these things freeze, they're not registering anything.
And with a second home, that could be just someone not being there.
Yeah. They do have a feature on them that's a low temperature detection system. But it's triggered at a temperature that's higher than what our water temperature in our lines is right now. So they're pretty much all showing low water temperature. Okay. Yeah, and so this has been a challenge. It's gonna continue to be a challenge for a little bit. We're trying to be as proactive as possible, and yeah, it's definitely a situation, but we have definitely seen kind of unprecedented circumstances out there with the unique weather that we've had. I discussed with you some of the challenges we encountered on the roads with ice damming. That is still, that's a daily thing we have to stay on top of right now.
Well, thank you for coming in this afternoon, and thank you, gentlemen, for everything that you do. I know you have made a lot of progress over just the last year, and I know there's a lot more to do, and I have every confidence that you'll be able to handle it. Need to make sure Logan gets a hat on his way out.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right, we'll now move on to what was formerly item A, discussion on geo bond capacity. I apologize, Manager Weir is ill today, so he wasn't able to make it. I believe, is this Eric?
This is Eric.
Harrigan. Eric, are you gonna be presenting again this afternoon?
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. And so I think that what Mr. Weir wanted to do was a follow-up to the discussion that we had at your last council meeting, which we went over several sort of scenarios. So just as kind of as a refresh to the discussion that we had at your prior council meeting. So back in so voters have authorized the issuance of up to 1.8 million. That they're before the council this evening. There will be an ordinance to issue that 1.8 million that has already been authorized by voters to be placed through the New Mexico Finance Authority. Will be coming back to the council for a second and final reading in the February timeframe. But I think specifically to what Mr. Weir wanted to talk about and address was the potential to add additional geo bond authorization and the discussion of various impacts to adding additional authorization. So we had run a scenario that maintained the village's existing tax rate, which right now the city's tax rate to service its general obligation bonds is $4.21. We estimate that the village can go back to voters in 2027 in the amount of $5.5 million and continue to maintain that rate with an additional $5.5 million 4 years later in 2031. We did look at potentially going back to voters as early as this year, and what was the tax impact to that. We estimated that the village could go to voters as early as this year and ask for approximately $6.75 million. That would bring the village up to about 75% bonded to capacity. It would result in a tax rate increase, though. That tax rate would be right around $2.05. To sort of translate that into the impact to a homeowner for a $600,000 home, the annual property tax impact would be about $410. For $1 million home, it would be around $680. We also looked at taking the village up to effectively 100% bonding capacity, and what would that impact look like? That would allow the village to go to voters and ask the voters for authorization in the amount of approximately $9.5 million. The increase associated with that would be around $3.80 for a $600,000 home. That tax impact would be about $760 a year. For $1 million home, it would be around $1,260 per year. So those were the scenarios that we had presented to council at your last council meeting. I think that the intention was to see if the council had any desire to, move forward with an election this year, or if the desire was to wait until 2027. I know during his presentation that one of the reasons for potentially going back early is just the cost of improving roads is pretty significant And so they were looking at ways to potentially increase the amount of geo bond debt that the village has that can go towards improving road and sewer around the village. So that's just kind of a recap. I'm happy to answer any questions. I can go through, I can share my screen and go through the material in more detail. It's the same information that I presented a couple of weeks ago, but mostly was wanted to be available to ask, questions of the council.
I have one question. If we elected to do the increase and get the additional funds now, would we still get the 5.5 million in 2027 in addition?
Great question. No, so this would be in place of that. So you would be going back to voters 2 years early, asking for additional, asking for slightly increased capacity. So instead of asking voters for 5.5 million in 2027, you'd be asking for 6,750,000 in 2025. You'd be able to go back to voters in 2029 for additional 6.7 million. So it's not in addition to that, it would be in place of.
Any other questions right now?
No, I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
I would certainly be in favor of the 75% with the current election.
And of course, this will be, I believe it's on the council agenda as well. I'm in favor of, quite frankly, I wouldn't say for selfish reasons, but because we have such a good team in place, good public works director, project superintendent with Rocky Lira. My term will be ending in 2027, I believe. Is that right? I'd like to spend as much of it as possible. Under this team's guidance. And I also feel like too, with the money that we're currently seeking in the legislature and other grants and so forth, anything we can put up for matching, any engineering work that we can get done with this money to help secure other funds, I think is incredible. And so just the effort we put forth over the last year and are currently putting forth right now, I think we could do a lot more with this geo bond money than what we've seen in the past.
Okay. What's the increase at the 75% tax increase?
204.
205?
$2 and a nickel.
I mean, it's real impact on the taxpayer, and so I feel like we would obviously have to give them something for that, but, we have a lot of projects on the board at the same time that need attention. Director Epler, do you have any comments?
Well, good afternoon again. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with projects that we have, I guess you could say on the books at this point and what we're envisioning moving forward with. It's gonna be kind of critical to have that ability to keep them moving. The element of not only being able to have dollars available to do projects themselves, but knowing that we're going to be stepping into a very large challenge in trying to get dollars to upsize the undersized water lines, so forth and so on. A very, very key element to that is having plan and design ready and having shovel-ready projects to get approval for the big ones.
And I was wondering too, how long it would, the water line and, the size, need to increase the water lines. Would that, be something you could start next year if in case we had the funds to do it, or would that be 2 years down the road?
I'm really hoping to start on some of it this summer.
Okay.
I'm actually going to Albuquerque tomorrow to meet face-to-face with the president of our staff engineering company, Tappan Mahoney. I've got plans to scan, 1973 version, when the stuff was installed. I'm gonna get with him face to face and talk about all of the projects that we have and do everything we can to push forward to make sure that our affordable housing, workforce housing, our Allen Fields project, and our project moving forward with upsizing the water lines, get as much of it ready as we can to hit the ground running come springtime, when the snow melts.
Sooner than later.
Hopefully we get some tomorrow.
It's looking good.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments at this time? Thank you, Eric, I appreciate you coming, calling back in this afternoon.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Moving on to item C, discussion to proceed with the night skies ordinance. Ms. Kaiser?
Martin, how hard it is to breathe. So that I can be understood. Do I have permission? I tested negative for COVID. I've never run a fever, but I just wanted to be respectful of everybody. But I think we've got a good distance here.
Sure.
Whew, I can breathe. Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor, Councilman. Thank you again. Since the Night Sky Committee last attended the Village Council meeting 2 weeks ago, the committee discussed among themselves and revised the provisions of the proposed ordinance, taking into account the comments that we received at that meeting. And also we held a committee meeting open to the public on January 23rd, and with suggestions from the public at that time, we further modified it. Because you guys have a real aggressive agenda, I'm going to try to keep it brief unless you want additional detail towards the end. But I wanted to start out by addressing the concerns that were emphasized at the January 14th council meeting. First of all, our latest revision, which would be in your packet, it eliminates any references to indoor lighting or indoor fixtures. So that's no longer a part of our proposed ordinance. We also eliminated any references to the sundown curfew. In paragraph big C, little a, we removed the provision that a short-term rental property must submit a lighting plan and apply for compliance review prior to receiving a permit. And in paragraph big E, little b, and then we changed the transition period for residents for non-conforming residential lighting to 5 years. So I think those were the kind of the 4 major points that were of concern at that meeting. Also, there were concerns about enforcement. So as to not be overreaching, we've added new words that parallels the existing provision that violations, and we found the wording in Title 12-1-6, that violations are to be managed by the code administrator or designee. So in that code that does exist, we've kind of paralleled the wording there, that violations are to be managed by a code administrator or the village designee. And in section 4-5-11, for violations of chapter 5 of the code, which is the clean door provision, we took the penalties from that provision and kind of mimicked it. For a first offense is $50, a second offense is $100, and $200 for third and subsequent offenses. And that's for any residential violations. The business violations would be twice that, 50, 200, but 300, not double of 2. And then we also modified the language of enforcement to include violators may be subject to fines, and multiple repeated and egregious infractions may be grounds for revocation or denial of a business permit. So we think we have modified our proposed ordinance to be in line with other existing ordinances. There was also a concern about the cost to the village of how you know, how much is this even gonna cost to comply? So I contacted Mr. Stenoff, who is the Vice President of Engineering for Crossroads LED. This was one of the two references I provided there. And they're based out of Oklahoma. It was a very pleasant conversation. He was actually on his way to and from Jemez Springs because he had several other communities he was working with. He said their company is very familiar already with Angel Fire because they provide services for Eagle Nest. And I was telling him now, no commitments, no bid, no proposal. I just wanted a ballpark figure of what it cost to do a cost analysis study of what it would cost for the municipality to comply. And he said a broad range, no commitments, no nothing, would be about $5,000 to $15,000. And he said this would include an analysis of municipal lighting, major businesses, and condo associations. And then I contacted also Jack Corbin, who's the marketing manager for Clanton and Associates. They're out of Boulder, Colorado. And he said their minimum level of engagement is around $30,000 to $40,000, but does include community engagement, education, and meetings with the village staff and council, and seemed to emphasize more so ordinance building. And so I tried to contact him back. I didn't reach him before today's meeting to get more specific on if this was an addition to a cost analysis or if that would be a separate project. But I felt very hopeful in being able to reach two representatives of lighting consulting companies who would be interested in working with the village for cost analysis programs. So what I hope, did you have a question?
Did one of those conduct the same analysis at Los Alamos?
Both of these were referred by Los Alamos, so actually which one did which, I'm not sure. But yes, both of them came from Galen Geisler of the Los Alamos County. I'm hoping this would be an easy question before proceeding with additional input. When we were originally drafting our ordinance, and I was looking at the existing ordinances, and it appeared that most definitions for any kind of terminology were all in Chapter 3 definitions. So our recommended ordinance says, please revise Chapter 3 to include all these various definitions that we needed. But then in reviewing ordinances that have been more recently passed, it looks like definitions are included after the purpose of each ordinance so that they're all kind of contained in the same space. So I didn't know if it would be prudent and just easier at this time to not request that our definitions be part of Chapter 3, because that I think would entail an amendment to Chapter 3 if we just make the first section of our ordinance, or second section after purpose, be definitions and it be included in the whole ordinance rather than separated out into Chapter 3 with other village definitions. So to me, that's kind of an administrative procedural change, if that would be agreeable, and I think more efficient with the council when we get down to the final wording of this. And then I could go on. There were like 10 other very small changes. Do you want me to iterate them now, or just briefly? You want me to see how fast I can go? Okay. The other small changes we made was to include the definition of lumen. We also spelled out the name of Illuminating Engineering Society, National Electric Code, and National Fire Protection Association before we had used the acronym. So we just thought it would be clear if we spelled out those associations. Also in the definitions, we eliminated the reference to light source being visible from another property, and then we eliminated the definition of light source. Under purpose, we added paragraph B to big paragraph A. The new paragraph says one of our purposes is to coordinate with and augment other provisions in the village code. Because there are and I referred to this at the very beginning of what we have now as a code, 4 other places where the existing code says, and refer to section 9-7-8. So we're trying to coordinate and be a part of the whole ordinance. Big paragraph B, little d2, clarifies the curfew for non-adaptive landscape lighting. Big B, little f, eliminates the curfew for flagpole lighting because federal and state law have precedence over any of our ordinances. Big D, little a3, changes government agencies and businesses must have adaptive controls to may have adaptive controls. DB3 provides that lighting for monuments and statuary may have adaptive controls that reduce lighting to 25% of the total allowed, rather than being subject to a 10% curfew cutoff. We separate the provisions for non-conforming existing lighting into a separate paragraph E for clarity, and we added an exemption for highway directional lighting. So we hope we have addressed most of the concerns that were brought up both at the last council meeting and at our meeting on January 23rd. And then, like I said, I've been in contact with 2 lighting consulting companies who are interested in working with the village and have given me rough ballpark figures for what their cost would be to do a cost analysis study. So any other questions or concerns?
I mean, I'll be honest, first of all, I would like to say thank you for doing this, putting this committee together and for all your hard work. I did support, and agree to support a dark sky ordinance, back when I was running for mayor. But that's what I was promoting, was a dark sky ordinance. And I do feel like that this committee has taken this and turned it into more of a dark ordinance. A lot of the things that I'm familiar with in a night sky ordinance would be more just the type of fixtures. Lumens are involved, but shielding the light source, downward projection, and so on and so forth. I can understand why every bit of this is in here, but again, some of my concern is, even if we have the means to enforce it, there's so much to enforce. There's some other issues in it that I still have, for instance, item E, big E, little d, upon sale or exchange or transfer of property to an owner, the property shall be brought into compliance with this section before being approved by the village. We don't approve transfers. I mean, maybe a water meter transfer, utilities, but we don't do inspections or regulate anything like that on the transfer of a property.
I think where I got this information was probably the Architecture Review Committee,
Exactly.
where, like, if there's a chain link fence.
So that would apply to them, but not to the village
But
ordinance.
Jake may know, but do they have the authority to do something that's not part of village code?
So they don't have the ability to modify their covenants. They are what they are. The only way to do that is with a 75% majority vote of all property owners in a specific subdivision. So there is a means to do it, it's just practically infeasible. So in this case, if an ordinance like this were to get passed, the village ordinance would be far more prescriptive than what the covenants are at this point. Right now, the covenants match the existing village language, which is very one sentence generic. You know, there's not a lot of detail in it. So I think what the mayor's point is we don't regularly as a village entity involve ourselves in the transfers of property. We don't have a mechanism to monitor that, in other words.
We don't have a building inspector. We rely on the state of New Mexico for all of our, to enforce the building codes. The permit you get here, there is a plan review, and it would be important if this is passed, and this is one of the things I support, is new construction. Have dark sky in mind with exterior lighting. But I will tell you too that the state officials aren't gonna enforce that because it's not state code. That would fall then on a compliance officer. back to the point of a transfer of sale, we don't have an inspector that goes out and inspects properties before they transfer from one owner to another. Nor do I see us ever having that role, at least in my term.
But, so, the parts about, for new construction, so that, now, does that go before a
So we-
village planning committee?
It goes to our planning and zoning department when we issue a permit.
Right.
And so if this is an ordinance and new construction is in that, then yes, that'll be conditional on getting that permit. You can go build whatever you want at that point, and then if it's in violation, I say whatever you want, as far as the state's concerned, because we don't have an inspector then that goes out to make sure that you built what you said you're gonna build. That would fall on a compliance officer later. So, again, it would be just like any other nuisance complaint, it would be treated the same. I do think it's important, though, to transition, to a dark sky community. I value the night sky, and again, I think you misread my email, that I wasn't targeting certain lights, but have identified and used them as examples. And one is, for instance, the car wash. That light is, it's just obnoxious. I don't know how else to say it. The same with our fire stations, especially fire station number 2. I drive past it on my way home at night. I don't think that that's attractive, and it's just flat light pollution. I'm so grateful to Roger Lowe and everything he did for this market. If any of you were here when it was the Valley Market before it was Lowe's, I mean, the amount of money and improvements he put into that for this community is astounding. But I lived right behind Lowe's when he did that, and when those lights went in the parking lot, we lost a big portion of our night sky. So I understand the need for that, and obviously if an ordinance like this passes, I want to be able to give Roger 5 years to understand what we're doing and replace those. I don't know what the lifespan are, but give him time to take care of that and put in something to that effect. I also want to make sure that if we're working with Kit Carson on new streetlights and that sort of thing, that we're working in night sky, dark sky technology. Regardless if this ordinance passes or not, I would encourage the village to lead in that regard. So again, I want to say I'm in full support of a dark sky ordinance. My concern is other dark sky ordinances that I've seen. I know there's some that are more strict than this. There's many that aren't, and quite frankly, there's not that many dark sky communities in the country. We would be on the front edge of this movement and protecting this night sky. I don't want it to be overbearing. I think it was mentioned by Director Epler and also manager at your meeting. I did go back and watch the meeting. I apologize that I was out of town last Thursday evening. But we haven't received any phone calls in support of this. We've received a lot of concerns that it could be a little overreaching, and again, I'm willing to support it with the proper timeframes and the proper restrictions. I just want to make sure that it's something that the rest of the community we can work with on.
So, we've been inviting community people, are there?
Yeah, they're here today.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to, kind of disagree with you on that we're one of very few communities. Actually, when we were building our ordinance, we did not intend to be a recognized community of the International Dark Sky Association, because we knew the parameters for that were very strict. And we didn't think that at this point in time we could do that. Maybe after a number of years, when we had a basic plan in place, we could grow towards being an International Dark Sky recognized community. But in my speaking with these two representatives from the consulting agencies, and then in my other research, there's many communities, and many more are going towards some form of a night sky ordinance. So again, I don't feel like we are trying to be on a leading edge. I think we're actually on a following edge on developing anything to protect our night skies, and especially since most communities are trying to be International Dark Sky Association recognized, and we know that that's pretty difficult to do, so we're not prepared, we're not intending that this ordinance be compliant with that.
Okay, well, and the reason I bring this up because I've had firsthand experience in Fredericksburg, Texas. So in 2020, they were designated they received its designation as a dark sky community. And it was done so basically on the ordinance being passed, because I believe you had 6 or 7 years to come into compliance. And their ordinance is only 3 pages long. It excludes all streetlights. There's a lot of things that are a lot more lax than this particular one. And I don't know when this was published, but at the time, they were one of few in Texas and only 33 in the world. And that could have been as late as 2020. There are only 51 dark sky communities in the world, with the majority 33 being in the United States. Again, that could be 5 years old. But again, when I was in support of that, it was in something, because having a property there, I understood that I had what I needed to do, and I had 5, 6 years to do it. And it wasn't, it's very simple to understand what's being asked of me.
In my reading of the Fredericksburg one, were there provisions for building codes? Like if you build a new building, you have to do this?
I believe so.
Okay. I'll have to go back, because I was reading, you know, what I thought very carefully, the Fredericksburg Code, and to me, it, then again, you know, I've read so many of them,
Sure.
can't keep them straight, but it didn't seem to be very effective, but if they are recognized by the International Dark Sky Association.
So, and I thought that was quite an accomplishment, and so for them to be able to do that, I mean, that was the direction I saw us going. And of course, I think it's important to start somewhere, and if there needs to be an ordinance. We already have a nuisance lighting, as you've pointed out, that we're not very good at enforcing.
Well, to me, it's not very definitive. What does nuisance mean? So
Right.
there's no definition.
And I think we're crossing the two here. That's my point. I'd like to, I mean, for a dark sky ordinance, focus on the dark sky, which I think is more about just the proper modern fixtures that push the light, not in a general direction, but in a designated direction. Then shielding bulbs, they give tons of examples of acceptable fixtures and unacceptable fixtures, and those sort of things. So again, I mean, I'm not trying to, I know you have a lot of time and effort in this, and I wanna be in full support, but I have to make it something that I feel comfortable supporting, and that we have the resources to enforce. I also think that the enforcement clause needs to be in there. I think there needs to be teeth in there, because it's as simple, quite frankly, as if, I mean, I don't think anybody's gonna just continue to get a fine versus just shutting off the switch or even the breaker so that it can't be turned on, if it comes to that. But I do wanna have, that's one issue I have with our ordinances that we currently have and don't enforce. Either we need to start doing a better job of enforcement, or we need to take away the ordinance, if it's not something that we feel like we can enforce. So we're still at that phase. I understand this is more of a motion to proceed, which I wanted to see it proceed. And I apologize too, because there's been several changes over the last couple of weeks, and this is the first time that I've seen this iteration from last Thursday's meeting. So I appreciate the direction it's going, and I apologize too if you feel like there hasn't been any public input, but we have made the notices. Again, I hope you understand too that that's the reason we're having this work session and council meeting for committee reports, that we want to hear and understand what's going on. Again, Councilor Crane's done an incredible job of whenever there is movement on something, keeping us up to date. So I'm not trying to discourage you in any way, and again, it's not up to me, it's up to this council. But I just wanted you to understand personally, face to face, my concerns with it. And I thought I laid some of that out in that email. It wasn't that I did in response to your email last week. And so, again, I just want to make sure that it's something that makes sense, that we can integrate over 5 years and push Angel Fire in the right direction. And I want the village to be the one leading the charge, again, with just the lighting that we know that we need to address right away.
So I think what the committee needs is help specifically with concerns, and at this point, unless I misunderstood anything, then the one thing that specifically needs to be addressed would be that the village does not monitor or manage in any way transfer of property.
Right.
So if, without a village provision, again, and again, I think my knowledge goes back to the Architectural Review Committee, where if there's a chain link fence or something, then they have the ability to ask the property owners to come
Right.
into compliance.
Sure.
So, but then the Architectural Review Committee, without a village ordinance or the impossible getting the property owners to change, then we would need to eliminate that part, is that correct?
So again, we have to be cautious, this body doesn't have anything to do with Architectural Control Committee, that's a HOA. We're village-wide, although the majority of the properties in the resort are in,
HOA.
or in Angel Fire in the resort. So not to conflate or compare the two, but yes, we have the ability to create that ordinance and look to enforce that ordinance. The Architectural Control Committee, from what I understand after years of serving on that committee, can't add or take away from the covenants without a huge majority of the membership voting. And quite frankly, we have never been able to get anywhere near that kind of response. So those covenants are what they are. So to update it with the dark sky ordinance,
Yeah, I see. I think my misunderstanding was that the Architecture Review Committee relied on village code, but that doesn't sound like that's correct. then.
no,
Okay.
and I will say that, and I think Jake can attest, he's currently the chairman of that committee, can attest that over the last year, maybe even the last 2 years, that the village and Architectural Control Committee are communicating with one another. But we're not in place, our code compliance officer and our police chief isn't here to enforce their
Right,
rules and ours. When they overlap, that's one thing. But yeah, we can't enforce their restrictions and they can't enforce ours.
Okay. So if that paragraph were eliminated, are there any other, I mean, it seems to me, and I'm, again, interpreting that there's a hesitation on the overall, but not information on specifics, where we're trying to be more specific than what exists and tie in.
I understand and I appreciate the detail, I truly do.
Well, to us, without the detail, then we're back to where we are.
Well, I think it just comes down to lighting, and I think it comes down to what's an acceptable source of lighting and what isn't. And again, there's a number of fixtures that are available and a number of fixtures that aren't. So for instance, I'm not in favor of any lighting curfews. I would, if this is just an example, that if it's a non-conforming light, I mean, I'll put it in practical terms. I'm in bed at 9:30 every night. So whatever's on at 10 o'clock at night doesn't bother me from 10 to, it's the hours before that. So I don't want someone with a non-conforming light be able to keep it if we pass this ordinance until 10 o'clock. I would rather see everybody be in conforming after 5 years and eliminate a curfew altogether. That's just something, I mean, that's where I think I'm even a little more strict than what you're proposing.
Well, I'd also say, what are the true polluters? Like he was saying, the car wash, that's obvious. There's a couple houses where you may have a beaming floodlight. That's obvious. I don't know anybody's, garden lighting that would be intrusive to the night skies. I mean,
And there could be, but they typically have a shield. So again, it goes back to, and I just want to say having those examples of conforming fixtures and non-conforming fixtures and giving everybody the opportunity to come into compliance or just turn the light off.
In many
period.
ordinances that we looked at, they did have 4 or 5 pages of the examples, like in the Fredericksburg one. But we were concerned about copyright information, about just taking something off the internet and sticking it in.
And I can appreciate
And
that, but,
since they're all just totally available on the internet, that's
yeah,
acceptable.
and
That's not.
we quite frankly, that's a common practice. It really is.
But as far as like you were saying, well, there wouldn't be any, landscape lighting, it wouldn't be shielded and stuff. We do have an example of someone who has like an array in their yard of lights that are this high. And like, for what? So it's there, we're trying to make it specific enough that,
Well, and then, you know,
Exception.
if someone has a fire pit, it's gonna be maybe more than 25 feet from their house, and this doesn't allow them to even light that path down to their fire pit or patio.
well, if they're.
Right, so again.
Yeah, it's hard to rule
It's
by
only allowed
exception.
25
Right,
Yeah,
of
there's
course.
no way.
So I think if the focus was more on dark sky lighting, and again, not only in new construction, but giving every homeowner and business the opportunity to come into compliance with that over a generous period of time.
Well, that's what we did change, 5
Yeah,
years.
I appreciate
So
that.
that's- Okay,
That to me is reasonable.
okay. What was the other thing I was gonna say? Again, trying to administer something by exception, so that's why we have the problem. But when you keep, I think where we're also trying to orient is you comment that we need a night sky ordinance with the shielding, et cetera, but there's more effects and ramifications of lighting than just up. There's the
But I thought we
sideways
were
lighting.
looking specifically at dark sky. That's what I thought the focus of this committee was, and protecting the night sky. And so that's where, again, I think we're crossing over into a lighting nuisance ordinance versus a dark sky ordinance.
So I would agree, yes, we're talking about light nuisance as well, yes.
Right.
And so you're asking us to not address light nuisance?
No, but that wasn't, in my opinion, the purpose of this committee. I think that's something, if we pass a dark sky ordinance, and if you wanna look at the nuisance ordinance separately, since it already does exist, and if it needs to be updated, I think that would be appropriate. I don't want it to try to bury this nuisance in the dark sky. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Like I said, the night sky was just a terminology. We weren't restricting ourselves to only night sky.
But again, I was under the impression that's what we were doing because I've had experience with it elsewhere, and I was in full favor of that. So again, I would, and if we wanna just redo the whole nuisance lighting ordinance to bring it into dark sky compliance with some other components, but I guess the issue is, we do wanna move forward with it. But every time that we send it back, it comes something else. It's a long detailed and a lot of information that we don't fully understand what the costs and ramifications. I understand that that's the need for possibly having someone do a study to examine this. And as we get closer, I do want to understand what it'll cost, not only the village, but businesses and homeowners alike to comply. But with a dark sky ordinance, I think that's easier to do than with a whole new nuisance lighting ordinance.
Well, I think, and someone can help. Our impression is,
I just wanted to.
If you'll come up to the podium,
Sure.
please.
I'm Nadine Nash, I'm on the Dark Skies Committee. We do have a definition for what shielded lighting is in there. We do have a definition for what type of lighting is okay. We have the maximum lumens per light bulb, so it is about diminishing the amount of light pollution that we have. The curfew that you're talking about is only for non-conforming lighting.
Right.
And we also had the provision in there before that after the grace period, the 2 years, 5 years, that any non-conforming lighting should be off at sundown. We took that off because of concerns about the sundown reference.
Well, I guess previously you'd said sundown instead of 10 p.m.
We said sundown in the portion that was after the grace period.
Right, it was a mistake.
I thought it was a mistake, I wasn't prepared for the discussion at that day, because
Yeah,
it wasn't a work
that's fine.
session, it was a council meeting. I was mistaken when I said it was a mistake, it was in there on purpose. It was after the 5 years, any non-conforming lighting needs to be off at sundown.
So and I think that makes total sense after 5 years.
Okay,
In other words, in 5 years from now, I personally, this is me speaking personally, don't wanna see non-conforming lights being able to run from 4:30 to 10 PM in the wintertime.
we can put it back in really.
But I'm just saying, those are the little things that I think we can agree on.
I guess what I'm struggling with is what is it that we are disagreeing on?
I think that the conflation of a nuisance lighting ordinance versus a dark sky ordinance.
So another thing that we were tasked with from the very beginning at the meeting that you were at, our very first meeting, was that we needed a method of enforcing it without having to hire a whole person to go around at night and check on people's lights.
Right.
So, this is a way for people who are up at midnight to look at whatever.
So that's the last
Phenomenon.
thing that we wanna be able to do, the last thing I wanna do, I wanna make clear that this is my opinion. I don't want neighbors enforcing on neighbors. What I would like to see is, so if you have an approved dark sky fixture, you know if it's a proper fixture in the daytime or not, just by, pretty simple standards. In other words, we don't have to send someone out at night when it's on and
Sure,
it's
I
not
mean,
on.
if y'all have a code
So those are
compliance
the type of
officer
things, and again, it's only because we're passing this, we only pass this as an ordinance, we need to make sure that it's hashed out. So I think there's some things in here that I personally would like to see a little more strict, and other things that come off, in this round. Again, and I wish that the council and the dark sky committee could meet on a regular basis. And maybe that's what we have to do if everybody's willing to do so, to hash through it. But I think we're getting closer with each round, and I don't want you to get discouraged. And
Yes, I think it's too late for that.
well, and so I also want to point out that this is also, you've heard the term, the speed at which government moves. This is a perfect example. But we're not looking strictly at your wants, my wants. We're looking at what's best for the village of Angel Fire. And quite frankly, I have yet to find anybody, nobody has emailed me or called me that's outside of this committee in favor of this. But I have seen people that are not.
Okay.
I just want to make sure, I want to help you get something across the finish line that we can help explain to those people that are not currently in favor of any changes at all.
Maybe if you could come to one of our committee meetings and we could discuss that there.
I'd be
So that we
happy to,
can
yes.
work through it all instead of doing this every time.
Unfortunately, this is the forum, and then your meetings as well. So I would be happy to. And I think it's important to have this dialogue in front of the public, with public
Absolutely.
input,
Right, as we
because
have
that's
the
how we're gonna get
meetings.
across the finish line.
Okay,
So I apologize for getting discouraged, and I want to do everything I can to help you stay motivated to get something done here.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I also want to commend the committee for everything they've done. I know this has been an arduous task, but we are getting closer. We will eventually get there. Depending on how this comes out from the detail side and the nuisance side, I do have recommendations on two things on the detail side I'd like to bring up. Big paragraph C, E, F, and G, and I'll read those for the audience. Paragraph F, any plan submitted to the Village of Angel Fire within 90 days prior to the adoption of this new section 9-7-8 are required to be resubmitted and show compliance before proceeding with the construction or receiving final approval. Paragraph G, any projects approved by the village for which electrical work has not commenced shall resubmit plans to show compliance before proceeding with construction. I would suggest eliminating those two paragraphs if this continues on the detail side as it is.
And I have to agree with Councilor Howland. Quite frankly, I think our attorneys would have nixed that right away as well. Once we do get it to our attorneys to review, but he's made an excellent point that really anything submitted previous to an ordinance change is grandfathered in, with what under conditions that the permit was issued. So it's an excellent point. And so I think it's gonna take a little more work, but I truly believe that we're gonna get there. Attila, I believe you wanted to
Thank you,
say
Mayor.
something.
Mayor, Council, I'm Attila Bally with the co-chair of the comp plan committee, but I'm actually coming as a citizen today speaking on, I supported Dark Sky Initiative for the village. And as someone on 2 committees, there's no way I can keep up with all the notes and minutes and time that's going on. It's a full-time position just to keep up with activity in the village. So I propose to the manager that the community consider having a town hall in the springtime, perhaps in May when all our golfers come back and we have a full community of the part-time residents. That town hall could have an opportunity for every committee to have a table in order to share what's going on. And for example, the Night Sky Committee could share the ordinance and the key parts of it and get community feedback at an event like that. I also think, and maybe I'm mistaken, if there is an education component to that, consider a homeowner's guide to Angel Fire and start with letting people know what kind of lighting's appropriate, what are the problems. You could do that for streets and roads and driveways and wetlands. You could do a whole homeowner's guide. So a couple of ideas to think about, but I would encourage council to hold off on this ordinance so there's a good community feedback loop, and maybe a town hall might be an opportunity for that. Thank you.
So I would suggest if council has specific things that they'd like addressed in this ordinance, that those somehow, some way be communicated to the committee. Don't make them guess at it, don't make them keep coming back and asking for it. Give them your notes, give them your revisions. The other thing is if we have businesses that are not gonna respond to this until it's at the 11th hour, that be considered. That if this is just going to find another delay, eventually committee members are gonna get frustrated.
Understood.
So, if there's time for debate and input, the time is either now at one of these work sessions or a committee meeting, or release the committee and let them go about their business.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor and Village Council, my name is Gary Zentera. I'm, as you probably already know, but for the public I can say, I'm also on the Dark Sky Ordinance Committee. And I've lived here for 15 years, not as a resident, but right outside the city, the village limits. And I've seen every year the light dome grow over Angel Fire. And what happens is someone puts something in their yard, another person puts a spotlight that's shining up, or that's not shining properly, or is very bright, like a Klieg light. There are some like that. And by themselves, they don't cause that much of a problem, but in aggregate, they do. And Mr. Mayor, you were talking about nuisance lighting and also dark sky lighting. They are intertwined. You can't say, well, there's nuisance lighting over here and there's dark sky provisions over here.
I agree.
They have to be intertwined.
Well,
You can't say, well, we can't bother with that. We gotta take care of the dark sky first. It's not possible.
Well, would you argue that if everyone was in compliance with dark sky compliant fixtures, it would reduce that light dome dramatically?
It certainly would.
Okay, I think that's something we can agree.
Mhm. Yes, but I'd also like to add that we did think that we did get all the input we asked for. And at this meeting, we seem to get more information that we were unaware of in the past. And that's kind of grinds on us because we did solicit this information from you before we came up with our latest revisions. And none of that was mentioned. So that's what makes it kind of tough on us as a committee.
And it is tough for all of us to get together, given all of our schedules. Again, I got the email, I think, on a Tuesday last week. I know you had a Thursday night meeting. Again, I was out of town on Thursday. So I did respond to that email with what I personally was hoping to see was just a common sense, practical approach to dark sky standards.
And I'm sorry if I disagree with you, but I think this is a common sense approach. And as far as as public input is concerned, a lot of times a new ordinance like this doesn't get any public
Until
input
it's passed.
until it's
Trust me.
passed.
And that's
So-
gonna be the case. I appreciate everyone being here today, and
Jake might correct me, I'm paraphrasing him, sorry to break in on that, but at the very beginning, he said something about it's important that we get this ordinance going, we get something in place, and then we see how it works. Well, I'm not sure that's exactly what you said, but when you had first addressed our committee, you said it's important to get something on the books, and then we can move forward. But if we keep having discussions and concerns and nothing gets done, then the light dome continues to grow.
The sense of urgency there is we build about 30 homes a year.
Yes.
Right now, there is no code, no ordinance, no anything that they are required to be in compliance with that has any enforcement mechanism. So the longer we continue to debate this, the more starts are gonna come out and the more homes that are then gonna have that 5-year time to compliance.
And that's
So-
exactly my concern.
understood. And I know 5 years sounds like a long time. But I think, I'm in full support of a 5-year term for people to come into compliance with the dark sky ordinance, once that is ultimately passed. And it may have, I mean, again, it's not up to me, it's up to this body. But I've just been vocal in the last several meetings. And I don't wanna write the ordinance for you. I mean, that's the purpose of the dark sky committee. This will still be coming up for a vote in the council meeting as written. And so it'll be up to the council to determine how we proceed.
Okay. Well, thank you, appreciate you hearing my concerns.
Thank you.
So is there anyone else that wants to speak before I jump in again? So if I understood correctly, you were saying maybe we should get together in a small group more often. So what would be the process to do that?
I mean, again, I think in one of your committee meetings, yes, I will commit, I mean, if we have a date that we can all agree on, I will be there. And, we can work through it there. I can, in this meantime, I can email you some, I mean, you're much more familiar with all the different dark sky ordinances. And like I said, I know that some are basic and some go to.
Oh, some are 35 pages.
Exactly. So, I think I can help you understand more, I guess, what I'm personally looking for. I would hope that the council could. One thing we can't be on is a group email. We can't be discussing this reply all, but individually with the committee. And you have to be cautious of the same thing with your committee. But one-on-one, and I know that's not the most efficient way to get there, and that's part of the reason why we're here today. But I do wanna make an effort on my part. Any two of us can be at one of your committee meetings at any time without a notice of quorum. Understand that you've been putting a notice of quorum, a possible notice of quorum on your agendas, and I think that's a wise move, and we should probably even look at doing that on all of our committee member meetings so that the counselors and myself feel more free to attend. But it is something that we have to be cautious of.
So that was gonna be one of my questions. So when we put that public notice, that there's a potential for quorum, would that allow more than 2 council
Yes,
people
in
to
that
be
case
there?
it could. Now, what we can't have is discussion amongst ourselves and we can't make any decisions as a council, but I mean, as a committee, one-on-one input, we can certainly do.
Okay. So I think going forward, and I fully agree, we need to make a more concerted effort for communication.
Yeah.
And so we'll develop a plan for that, so that, the other thing I hesitate to, maybe I shouldn't say it at all, okay?
But again, I can't thank you enough, really, all of our volunteers, but you specifically, Shelley, and your committee for what you're doing.
We're trying.
And so are we. We'll get across the finish line.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's how the sausage is made.
I would definitely also like to, have the committee look at item B, general provision standards, D and E, addressing tree, garden, and landscape lighting, as well as the temporary lighting of holiday string lights and roses. For the being extinguished at 10 p.m.
I had to circle that as well. No, I think, Shelley, I think that's what it's gonna take, and,
Look, again, I think it's a matter of communication, because the landscape and pathway lighting, we have a provision in that in direct response to a concern that was brought up at a council meeting, so I think we need to definitely develop a
Right,
communication.
and you're right,
avenue.
it doesn't work to come every 2 weeks and piecemeal
Right.
this thing one little letter at a time.
Well, I appreciate your time, like I said, I tried to keep it brief. but
No, I appreciate it,
doesn't
and
work.
that's not the goal here, we need to get it hashed out, so thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any further discussion or comments on, the procession of a night sky ordinance?
I just think that, you know, our night skies are an asset, and they do, I mean, looking at the stars is, I mean, people come up here and they're just blown away. But on the other side, I think you see some major light polluters, but as a whole, it seems like I don't see, you know, a whole lot of issues with the night sky lighting that's currently an issue, except for a few glaring properties.
I agree with what you're saying there, and I think keeping this as simple as possible is a much better way of going rather than trying to line item every little detail. And because when we get to that, we get bogged down.
Agreed. Okay, if that concludes discussion on item C, we'll move on to item D, the discussion of the Liberty Square design. Mr. Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the audience. Just a brief overview of how we got here today is that since the village was incorporated prior to 1998, when we incorporated a lot of this property, there was a discussion in 1988 that was kicked off again in 1997 and reaffirmed in 2008 with the comprehensive plans that were approved by the village. And in every one of those documents, there's this ongoing conversation that Angel Fire is missing a center place, a sense of like a plaza, or in Red River, the commercial corridor, the Taos Plaza. Well, in 2005, 2006, there was a really hearty conversation about the property right behind Village Hall. And in fact, in 2006, Congressman Udall, who represented northern New Mexico, personally came to Angel Fire and delivered a check for over $250,000 to help with the infrastructure that's set behind the building. The water, the fire hydrants, the water mains, the sewer mains. And then if you remember, there was a crash in 2008. And it's hard for folks to recover immediately from that. And then there was another thing with COVID. But since that, there's a new conversation on the comprehensive plan. I'm glad everyone's here to participate and respond to the emails to come out tonight, because we really need your input on the property behind Village Hall. So there was a plan that was created in 06, 08 that looked at a preliminary layout of Village Hall, of the police station, fire station. And so the company that helped design those plans in the past has come up from Albuquerque today. We actually have 2 stations that they'll walk through you with, but we really need everybody to participate and play. It's a really simple ask, even members of the council and the mayor. So we encourage you to participate, be active in it, and I'm going to introduce Ken Romig with Consensus Planning to introduce the rest of the team so we can get started on the exercise.
Mayor Lindsay, Council, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. If I could please pull up our presentation material so that we can present our firm qualifications and firm expertise to you all, to let you know who we are, introduce us. How would you know who I am if I'm not able to explain what the firm is that I represent and what I do? Oh, I'm sorry. Can everyone hear me? No. All right, then I'll start speaking to everybody. I'm here as, this is a proposed agenda really quick. We hope that we can get through sort of the introductions of both Consensus Planning. My name is Ken Romig. I'm a landscape architect with Consensus Planning. And we have I've compiled a design team of formative architecture, and there are members of them also here to present their firm qualifications as well, and have a conversation about Liberty Square, its vision, and its design. Let me just tell you that this is a shot in the dark in some ways. I've had a couple conversations with Greg and some of the councilmen, as well as the mayor, and I'm making some guesses about what the purpose of the Village Square is, about Liberty Square, what purpose it serves, and what its goals are primarily for. And I stand here waiting to be corrected. I stand here waiting for feedback from you all. I'm here in a very, very open manner, I hope, where I'm gonna get lots of feedback from everybody here. And then we'll have an opportunity to look at these big plans that we have of the property behind the village offices and play with where structures should go, play with how open spaces should connect to other open spaces such as your trail. How to make it all work to serve the village of Angel Fire. Next slide, please. Who I am, this is Consensus Planning, this is our group. Ken Romig and my colleague Ashley Maxwell is back in the back. Been an integral part of the landscape architectural practice area. And we are out of Albuquerque. We have been in business since 1991 in downtown Albuquerque. We are a landscape architecture and planning firm that works on master plans, area plans, metropolitan redevelopment plans, recreation plans for communities across New Mexico, as well as for the Southwest. Landscape architecturally, we design parks, we design streetscapes, we're working on memorials, we do a lot of open space and a lot of housing development projects as well, as in terms of landscape architecture. Next slide, please. We have experience in significant urban design, including parks that have multiple phases. For instance, if Liberty Square has multiple phases, you start thinking about phases, and you start thinking about how the money's gonna come in to fund these different opportunities you all have back there. We've worked with C&M in educational environments. We've worked for the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center downtown Albuquerque in their campus development, and this indicates some of our master plan experience associated with big parks projects and multiple developments. This is, that little screen indicates we've been working on an aquatic center up at North Domingo Baca Park. Please, next slide, please. I'll go through this fast. Chamisa Hills, it's a golf course that's gone belly up. We're looking at putting housing in there and creating a retail center. And these are the type of visualizations that we can provide, that we provide on a regular basis to our clients, so that you can put a picture in front of people and say, this is how it could look. This is how we're beginning to envision it. And this vision doesn't come from us. I think in more and more, it is supposed to come from you, and we're a conduit to express it in such a way that it garners public support. Next, please. We've worked on large projects, very large projects, including the Albuquerque Regional Sports Complex. The two images on the right, the one up above is the built environment. The one below is our visualization of what that built environment could be. So we come fairly close. We come as close as possible to give you a sense of what the space could be for you and your community. Next, please. We also have been working on the International Balloon Fiesta Park in multiple phases. Been master planning it since 1994, going through multiple phases of construction and design. We have a lot of public outreach experience with this park, a lot of landscape architectural projects. Recently, we've been working on the United Soccer Stadium and its integration into Balloon Fiesta Park. Next, please. We've also done just simple parks and visualizations, renderings associated with parks throughout Albuquerque. These are kind of what you might expect from us if we are presenting ideas to the community and the public. Maybe it goes into a legislative handout, maybe it goes any number of funding opportunities. It would find its way into an application and be representative of the vision you all have for Liberty Square. Next, please. Visualization, these are visualization examples as well. We worked with the Biopark recently on their concert pavilion. These up above, these images above represent sort of idea development, just big idea development. how can we make this performance pavilion at the biopark really sing and really express what the biopark in Albuquerque is all about? So those were just really quick visualizations. We were working with formative architecture on that effort and to see the realization. They didn't choose any of these examples. They went to a pre-manufactured, and it serves the purpose and really accomplishes what the city really needed to accomplish. And that was all about keeping to your budget, understanding the amount of money you have available for this construction, and keeping our design in that budget. More visualization examples below, just to give you a sense of where we could go. We've done yet more sort of visualizations, so you understand we've had a lot of opportunity to do this work for a lot of different communities. Those two ones below are in Clayton. We do a lot of work with small communities throughout New Mexico. Next, please. This is a simple understanding of our services. We master plan, we have a lot of public outreach efforts, landscape visualization and renderings, of course, interdisciplinary collaboration with engineers, NEP of engineers, architects, soil engineers if we have to, geotechnical people. We're familiar with all the aspects of developing contract documents and administering construction. Next, please. If I could introduce Stephen Peters, he'll introduce formative architecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Mayor and Council and members of the community for this opportunity to be here. On behalf of Formative Architecture, Steve Peters, Principal in Charge. Really excited to be here. Want to represent the rest of our team. I'm joined today by my colleague Noreen Cramey, who is the Marketing Director for our firm. You can see many of our designers there pictured in front of a structure at UNM. Next slide, please. So to go over a little bit of our qualifications, as Ken mentioned, we really value the teamwork with Ken and his team. We've been able to work on a lot of projects together. At Formative, we really focus on building communities throughout New Mexico with a niche on outdoor education, outdoor recreation experience. Some of those you can see, we teamed up with Consensus on a master plan over nearby Eagle Nest for their campground facility that's currently under construction. You can read through some of the other examples there as well that kind of highlight some of our master plan experience throughout the state of New Mexico. Next, please. Also wanted to show a kind of a more zoomed in picture in terms of some regional experience, some recent project experience we have in kind of close proximity. As I mentioned, the Eagle Nest example. Also, we're really excited to be a part of what's called the New Mexico Reforestation Center in Mora. And that's basically a facility that's going to try to grow millions of seedlings to reforest our forests after forest fire events. And then lastly, another nearby current project experience we have is up in Taos. We're looking at a wrestling gym for their school. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we really have a passion for New Mexico, its beautiful landscapes, and the communities that surround it. And so I wanted to highlight some of our outdoor recreation and education experience. We're really proud of our work experience with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at Valle de Oro in the South Valley of Albuquerque. You can see a new visitor center there pictured at the top, as well as some other smaller projects, including a conceptual campground project that we did in Placitas, New Mexico. Next slide, please. Next, I wanted to highlight some of our civic experience. I understand that as part of the proposed development at Liberty Square, that's going to be a strong emphasis. And so we've had the pleasure of working around New Mexico with a variety of project types and communities on various sized facilities. Fairly recently, we helped the City of Albuquerque master plan a brand new African American Museum and Cultural Center, pictured at the top right. We have smaller examples working with the National Hispanic Cultural Center, looking at their art facility there. Nice little community center for the Boys and Girls Club at Farmington. And then fairly recently we completed a couple projects out in Clovis for Curry County, a brand new livestock pavilion, as well as what's called an indoor pavilion at the bottom right, which is a nice flexible event space for that community that's currently under construction. Next slide, please. I understand that Liberty Square will include a lot of uses, possibly including some retail. So I wanted to highlight some of our retail experience We've had the pleasure of working a lot in what's called the Sawmill community in Albuquerque, a lot of high-end boutique shops that has been really proven successful. And here are a couple of the build-outs that we helped with. Had a lot of fun with those projects for sure. Next slide, please. And then lastly, I wanted to share some of our public safety experience. I understand that it's critical that we have a replacement fire station as part of this development. And so you can see here some of our recent experience with the village of San Juan, as well as north of Albuquerque with Sandoval County. And then currently we're also working near Story Lake. There's what's going to be called through EMNRD, a new hot shot facility for bunkhouses as well as a fire station there. Next slide, please. So, as Ken mentioned, our design process is really heavily geared in the community. So we really want to work with the community, hands-on, face-to-face collaboration, talking about what is going to work best for your community. You can see a couple images here just showing our team in the field, literally in the middle, but then also, you know, within the building of the different communities. You can see at the right there, a recent example working with the school system in San Juan on the design of a new school. You can see in the center, that's our team meeting for the reforestation center in Mora. We're not afraid to get our hands dirty in terms of walking around, understanding existing conditions, and working with the community to make sure we get it right. Next slide, please. Also to reiterate what Ken had mentioned to you, we're very flexible in terms of the deliverables that we can provide to your community, in terms of what's going to be successful to sell your proposed project to your constituents, as well as to gain funding. And so we can help with little pamphlets, leave-behinds, online resources in terms of website development, fly-through animations, etc. Next slide, please. And then I'll turn it over to Ken. Sorry.
Thanks, Steve. This is a slide I created just to create our conversation, create our dialogue that begins, that you've been having since
2005.
2005, right. So it's very important to keep this dialogue going. And this is just a slide that I took a shot at what the goals could be, or a vision for Liberty Square could be, and that would be to support economic vitality and support social interaction, create a community space. I think I got that right, but I'm here to hear from everybody else if there's something I've missed.
There's only 2 points I want to make. I agree with everything you've just mentioned, but there was an allusion to, we need a new fire station. That's number one. But we also we have an opportunity now to finance a convention and event space. So those two elements, someplace on this property, I think are important to give some layout. And the event convention space would interact with a stage for events and some open space too, that they kind of integrate together. I know there's been a lot of conversations about Frank M. Trail, your committees at Parks and Rec. I feel that should be integrated as well. But those are just my observations. At least we've discussed fire station, event space, and its connectivity with the trails and everything else around.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to preface the point of this presentation from my standpoint. I wanted this to be in front of the council and the community, because what we're ultimately going to be seeking is moving forward with, first of all, a general layout of Liberty Square, because we're not going to build it all out in the next year, 5 years. But we are currently designing a brand new fire station, which is being designed in the lot right next door to this building, which adjoins the property in the rear. This building obviously adjoins the property in the rear. As Santos pointed out, we do have the opportunity and we have the funding to go after, to build a new event center. But we also want to have a new venue in the meantime. So what we don't want to do is piecemeal this thing. We need to have an ultimate plan. And I understand for anybody that's spent any time in Angel Fire, to spend money on a conceptual plan, there's literally been hundreds of thousands of dollars of conceptual plans filed away in drawers all over town. And I don't want this to be another one, but I think it's a crucial first step in doing it right. So again, that's what I've asked them to present and how give us a starting point and how these other facets fill in the gaps over the next 5, 10, 20 years.
Thank you, Mayor. Exactly. Appreciate that. So, the idea, I'd just like to put some design principles in front of everybody. I mean, backing up, that's exactly where we hope to intend. In terms of deliverables, I think we're gonna have a layout, phased layout associated with the improvements over time that is in concert and in agreement with the council, the mayor, and the residents of Eagle Fire. That would be one thing. And the other thing would, possibly that would progress into further work for you, including possibly the design of the event center or the performance space. That is entirely how it's up to, of course, the village to see if we accomplish that task in a manner that warrants our continued work with you. I'd just like to put these design principles. I love to pontificate about design principles for good village squares. All right, just got to put that in front of everybody because we're going to visit a plan from 2004, and you're gonna see some of these aspects in it. Activating its edges, really critical to have retail, diverse retail, and diverse experiences associated with the outside of a village square or plaza. Locating the square at the town focal point, I think we've accomplished that. There could be no better place, I think, for the village, for the Liberty Square than where you're considering it today. Simple vehicular and pedestrian access. Thank you, Santos, for your mentioning that is very critical. Programming it for continual use, really making it valuable for everybody. Create flexible, safe spaces for everybody as well. Create an environment where you're going down there at night and you feel safe. And create long-term community support with community outreach. All right, let's move on really fast. This is the 2004 plan. You'll see that it's surrounded mostly by civic uses. There's one portion of retail on the southern side. That's the western side. And that was the old 2004 plan that we've been looking at right now that was created by consensus planning some time ago. Next, please. This is the current state of the properties and what we're considering. I'm sorry, you cannot see that. But the idea is that there's still a fair amount. The yellow is civic spaces around what is the town square. And then there's two areas to the south that are considered retail. These two little images right there are images I worked up really fast and put in front of Greg. The ideas of this plaza, this event space being in the far southeast corner. And we can revisit that. That's just an idea. All sorts of ideas. Next, please. The constraints graphic. We have a sanitary sewer line that runs along the eastern edge. You can't trespass into that. We have a lot of infrastructure we have to work with. Those are all constraints. There are also fantastic opportunities. We have great location, we have great views, and we have a connection to a fantastic existing trail system. So there's a lot of things working in our favor to make this a successful square, this village square. This was just a study of plazas in New Mexico, how they work and don't work. I think that we could revisit this slide if you wish, but we know Civic Plaza downtown Albuquerque doesn't work because it's too large and it's surrounded by civic uses primarily. But then there are smaller squares that are more human scale, such as Taos, such as Santa Fe, that just are comfortable feeling, really comfortable. And they're surrounded by retail, and they're surrounded by some churches and institutional uses as well as museums. So I think this could stand to be reviewed and discussed at length, and hopefully we'll have a chance to do so. But I don't want to take up too much more time let's go to the next slide, and then these are just plaza precedents. How do you want it to look and feel? How do you want your visitors to experience Angel Fire? I would like everybody to sort of explore that for themselves and convey what they are thinking. How do they think of Angel Fire, and what is unique? How can we make this space unique? And that's the end of my presentation. I really thank you very much.
Ken, do you want to lead us into the works, what the expectations are and where people should go? Well, we're asking everyone to play. Please
Right.
do. It's awesome.
So
I
we
feel
have-
like in kindergarten.
We have a plan over here and a plan over there. We have precedent images about architectural precedents, the look and feel of architecture, look and feel of landscape. We'd love to have your opinions about that, that we're gonna be gathering opinions. You'd be welcome to stand over these spaces and place buildings where you think they ought to go, land uses where you think they're most appropriate, and we'll just listen. Really, we're here to listen and learn about what is best for this space.
So you've got parking lots, where they should go, a civic building, the new fire station. One thing I would add from Ken is that you'll notice that there are some lot lines on the property. I encourage you to ignore them. We're really just looking at the placement of how this should look.
Inside the boundaries.
Inside the boundaries, yes, there's several lots inside. There's an overall boundary, we're not gonna go into the street. But in some of the conversations, if we feel that something should really be on the line between lots 5 and 6 or whatever, that's fine. Don't feel constrained that you gotta put it into a specific square. But, yes.
Do we have any opportunity to put anything in the space that's not owned by a village department, owned by the village?
A suggestion box? There's feel free to make a suggestion.
Yes, we do have no takers, so yes. We want everybody's ideas and placements as best as possible. If you could look at some of these ideas that they've brought to say, what are some of the concepts that could go on the property? Fantastic. We do have 2 working stations, and we also have trace paper too, so that we can send some alignments and things that, how do we try to integrate this into a better spot?
And let me point out too, I think it's safe to say that when the new fire station is built, we will be abandoning Fire Station 1. And if there's not a fire station, an active fire station on that property reverts to Angel Fire Resort. They donated that property specifically for an active fire station. They also own the property known as Lot 1, which is a large piece of property that adjoins this. Now, the resort has agreed to entertain, they want to see what our plans are for it, and if they can integrate or offer to us via lease or a sale on either one of those properties, then we could expand into those areas. But they want to make sure that it meets their needs, and we need to understand if we need it at all. But those are areas, to your point, that we can play with.
Are they clearly designated on both of these? I know the fire station should be pretty clear, but what about the other one?
So it's listed as Lot 1, is the property that the mayor just referenced. It's the one that touches North Angel Fire Road.
Right.
So that's clear, and then,
It's a big property.
it's big, yeah, it's a big lot, yeah.
And so, and that's another reason for this, is we need to have, versus just discussions and ideas, we'd like to have some visuals, some literature, to better understand what our options are and see if that's something that the village and the resort can collaborate on.
BJ, is there anything on the fire station that already shows the look of it?
Yes, we do have, Renner's chief, Vance can speak to that.
Not the plan, not the plan, the exterior.
That's still being designed with the fire chief. He's had conversations on the design. I don't know if you realize this, but none of our fire stations are big enough to house all of our apparatus. You have an engine that's parked outside because it won't fit, and we've got others that you can only fit 2 vehicles in at, I think it's Station 2. So the chief's been looking at getting a right size Station 1 where we can put all the apparatus inside out of the elements, that they can respond appropriately. So he's been having a lot of conversations on that aspect of design. They've looked at some, chief, stop me when you feel I'm going off, but he's had conversations on the outside exteriors that kind of blend into Angel Fire, that it's not just a metal shoebox trying to integrate some of the elements that you see here at some of the resort properties and commercial properties as well.
I think one of my points would be that we've spent, whoever spent it, we've got a very nice frontier park that's very attractive, landscape-wise, and with the facilities that are there, and we've just remodeled the building next door to it. If we're gonna go somewhere 180 degrees apart from that, that just doesn't make much sense to me.
Well, I'll point out that that is all owned and has all been paid for by Angel Fire Resort. So it's not village property, and one of the issues that we're having is, there's a lot of events that we enjoy having there, but there's a lot of events that we're having that we're outgrowing that space.
Right, I was just saying the look of that.
Oh, no, of course.
And now you're gonna come put in something that looks completely different.
No, and that's what we would like to see, is some continuity in town. This gentleman in the back had his hand up.
Yes, sir. Is there any proposed municipal use for Fire Station 1 once it's decommissioned?
Currently, no, and from what I understand, it has to be a fire station in order for it to remain village property.
Is there anything that we can approach the resort to and say, hey, this is a really good idea for us to keep and continue using for municipal purposes versus returning to the resort?
We certainly can, but one of the reasons too that we're designing a new fire station, and so yes, to answer your question, yes, I think the resort is definitely open to that discussion. But one of the reasons is that that building is in such poor shape, and what it would take to bring it up to standards, we're better off with a new fire station. And it's a bit of a postage stamp. But again, for another municipal building, yes, I think that's a discussion we can have, but I can't speak for the resort. Yes, sir.
I need a terminology clarification. The gentleman in the red used the expression exhibition center, is that correct?
Event space or convention space?
My vernacular is performing arts. Are we talking this basically the same thing?
It can, yes.
You know,
Yes,
stage, chairs.
Yeah, it's a multi-purpose
green
type of
room,
facility.
dressing rooms, stuff like that.
Yes, I think that's the idea. It's where it can hold large events, mid-size events. It opens up into open space where there's a stage outside as well.
What size would we be talking capacity?
20,000 square feet on the first floor, 30,000 square feet overall, is I believe what we can finance.
So how many people, chairs like theater, folding seats?
I don't know if we're at that level of detail yet.
You'll be able to see 300 people on the main floor
we need
in round, in round.
That would be desirable for us.
My name's Greg Ralph, I'm the tourism director. I sort of started this mess. I met Ken at a conference in a beer line. And I'm on a mission to host larger events in our community because we have outgrown Frontier Park. John Kitts, Greg Allen, the resort have been very understanding of us trampling their landscaping and stomping on things over there. But they would like to see us, if we're growing and we're gonna host larger events, we're bringing in a couple thousand people, where the events are driving lodgers tax revenue and putting money back in our coffers. We need this type of facility. I need a conference, event, meetings facility, a nice outdoor area and stage.
Law enforcement training, fire training.
Yes, meetings, weddings,
things like that.
conferences, all of those kind of events.
Okay. Plenty of parking.
Yes, and you'll see that.
Greg, you got one in the back,
Are you guys ready to play?
One more.
Last question, then we'll go play.
We still got some hands up. And we have another item we need to get to too. So let me do this. Let me get these last two hands, and we're gonna move on to item E. And then we'll hopefully have a little bit of time before the council meeting starts for everybody to play.
From the standpoint of flexible safe spaces, as identified on your slide, sir, I would ask that you guys had discussions with both the police and fire for emergency response, emergency breakdown potential, and that kind of activity. I'm sure the fire department as well as the police department would be interested in having proper infrastructure in place should a situation develop in the valley. Massive fire burning through whatever.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, I've heard numerous times that the resort was considering adding another lift going up to the mountain and starting it down in the village area. Is that anywhere near this location?
No, ma'am.
Probably be on the other side of the street. if they don't-
And currently the knowledge I have is they are installing 2 new lifts, and Mr. Manley, with the resort could speak more to that, but currently those 2 new lifts will be built, one on the back side of the mountain, which doesn't affect us at all. The other one is gonna be built up basically just to the south of the current hotel, so not down in this area.
Okay.
There has been discussion of that just amongst people in town, but there's no plans to do that anytime soon.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, with that, I want to move on to make sure that we keep plenty of time for item E, another important discussion. And again, we'll be able to wrap it with enough time to stay and play with Santos. He's,
Hey, if toys are out, you
got
gotta
his crayons out, so. Okay, I appreciate everybody, and thank you, everyone, for presenting. Moving on to item E, discussion on a dispensable space ordinance. Chief Vance, Chief Vance, Lindsay Reed, and Chris Romo.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Mrs. Strickland, thanks for having us here today. We have before us, we presented the council a defensible space ordinance. I'd like to make a couple of acknowledgements first. The Fire Adaptive Community Committee has worked very hard on this in conjunction with Brian Lindsay, Mary Stuber, the district forester from the Cimarron District, Rick Smith from the Cimarron Watershed, Mrs. Lindsay Reed, the fire ambassador, and Captain Romo here have all put extensive work into this, and we wouldn't be here without their effort. In about the last 6 months, since I became fire chief, this has been one of the top priorities set by management for us to be able to tackle. In attending multiple meetings for the Fire Adaptive Committee, I took a few months to kind of gather my bearing and see what direction we're going in. I feel like we were able to put together a focus and a vision and come up with the plan that's before you. You should have 2 documents. One of those is a 3-phase plan in which we staggered everything out to what we would believe should happen in the beginning of this ordinance. It would start with this defensible space ordinance today, followed by phase 2, potentially by a phase 3 in future states. For phase 1, we committed the focus to hearing the concerns about the ability of residents to get homeowners insurance for residential properties. So we decided we would start there and try to create a defensible space around those properties first, and then later to move on through vacant land and surrounding areas. I'd also like to mention that the Cimarron Watershed Project and other state and federal forestry projects are going on around the community. And so the approach that we took is that they are all addressing the community from the outside working in, around the perimeter of Angel Fire. So we would start with residences to start working out and hopefully work in the middle. Does anybody want to start off with any questions about the plan before I give a brief presentation?
One of the main things I would have is, people who actually did thin their lot or around their house. They've got tree permits and then just completely thinned out around their house. Are they gonna be grandfathered in some sorts to the new ordinance?
This is the first concern I've heard about grandfathering, but I would guess that any thinning that had happened before this defensible space ordinance would likely apply to the same criteria that we've set forth. So, for example, if you had limbs touching your home before and you thinned out those limbs and they're no longer touching your home, those are positive things towards having a defensible home. So those would all apply, but we wouldn't necessarily start in any one spot and say these people are grandfathered and these people are not. We would just take each case as its own and review it with a checklist that we've come up with. So anything that had happened before today would likely help in that case.
It would count towards the work, but those lots home, they would need to be recertified to whatever the new standard is.
To the new standards versus the standards we did.
And so I think the standards are likely very similar. There might be some minor differences here and there, but again, they would all apply. Making a house more defensible towards forest fire standards are mostly the same. Usually it's just a matter of number of feet between trees and things like that where you start getting into the weeds with that.
What about the size of trees for being able to defend themselves from a fire?
Can you
Larger
elaborate
trees.
your question, please?
I think larger trees with larger bark can defend a fire more so than.
Yeah, in my experience in a lot of these discussions about that, we got into the weeds, major discussions about things exactly like that. And really, I would ask that we leave that up to the people that have the subject matter expertise, that are foresters and educated in that field to be able to determine which type of trees. That being said, there are some provisions in there, if you read through the DSO, that kind of give some general outlines, but we're gonna look at a property as a whole, and that would include the neighborhood that it's in and adjacent fire breaks, et cetera, before we give a determination. Again, the objective is to be able to go out and review a house and look at it from the outside, look at all things considered, lots adjacent and everything else, give some recommendations. Hopefully those recommendations are followed through with, and the homeowner makes provisions to clean that lot up as far as fire considerations go, and come back out for a reassessment. We would go back out and issue a certificate that says you've been certified by the fire department to this level.
And these certificates would be invaluable to, given to your insurance company when applying for home insurance. So that's we're trying to take this in phases, but our goal number one is to have a safe community, but number two, to be able to insure this community.
Well, yeah, and I mean, if you have a proper lot that's thin, it's gonna be beautiful. I mean, it's, the resort itself's gonna be, I mean, the trees are gonna grow, but I just know people like me that have had their house for 30 years, I've thinned and thinned and thinned over 200 trees on my lot. Now I have these huge, beautiful trees on my lot because I thinned it. And, you know, now what am I gonna need to cut my large trees down?
I don't think so. I think one of the concerns that maybe this brings up, a good time to address, is oftentimes we get a lot of feedback for defensible space ordinance that we're gonna have to cut down all the trees in Angel Fire, and believe me, I'm up here because of the trees up here as well, and I wanna conserve that. If you cut down all the trees, then there'd be nothing left to stabilize the soil, there'd be no habitat for animals.
Yeah, I did it over years times, because, you know, the trees need to grow bigger roots.
Yeah. If I could give a general idea of how we look at this, is when a fire is spreading from point A to point B, typically it starts on the ground, it catches intermediate fuels catch taller fuels, and then it spreads within the canopies. So when you're approaching a firefight like that, you try to get the fire knocked back down to the ground and hopefully have some breaks in canopies, and a lot of the language in here is designed towards that. Having a break in canopy to be able to attack that fire, get it back down on the ground for something that's reasonable, because once it's in the canopies, if there is no break in canopies, it will run forever until it finds one.
One of the other things there was a lot of back and forth on is 4.3C, trees for privacy screening. Obviously, we've had homes being built here for many, many decades, and it typically is when somebody sites a home, they pick the trees that they want to leave. And many home sites have rows of trees that border the properties. They may be on one versus the other, but to create that extra privacy. So this does not prescriptively go in and make you remove trees above or below a certain diameter. It's all about the distancing and the fire breaks. So it's a little more of a site-by-site need with the people that have the expertise to evaluate you and your surroundings.
Another point of consideration I'd like to address is the amount of slash that this program would create. If we decided to do all lots within Angel Fire, including vacant lots, lots without homes on them, et cetera, it may create a slash burden on us that we're not able to compete with, frankly. Captain Romo and his crews have done a magnificent job over this winter break at thinning down. If you guys have ever driven back and taking a look at that slash pile that it's been there for, you guys tell me, 20 years or so, they've made a lot of headway. They made a final break in it today actually, and they split the largest pile in half, and we're on our way to get that completely thinned out by the beginning of spring. So when we have slash season begin again, we'll be able to process that. They're also making some provisions, and Captain Romo's made some recommendations as far as traffic flow and things like that to allow us to be able to increase our slash processing in a more efficient manner. So we believe that we can handle anything that this DSO would.
Turn taken to the audience can hear you too. They may be struggling to hear you.
I'm a
So
football
I
coach and
want
I
everybody
speak
to
pretty
hear you.
loud, hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, so
Thank you,
any
Chief.
questions from the community, before I get,
Yeah, how long would the certification kind of last for? Because obviously trees grow.
yeah, it's on a it's on a 1-year basis, so you'd have to get a recertification. We had discussion of having a biannual, every 2-year, basis. We're gonna start off with a 1-year. When we get into later phases and we get better compliance, our first objective is to get to a 50% compliance. So if we had 50% of the homes that requested that and it overburdened us with the amount that we were able to go out and do, then we would face that then. We might have to move to a biannual then. Once we get greater than 50%, we'll readdress it, or even after 1 year, we're gonna readdress it. So this isn't by any means intended to be written in stone forever. It's meant to be malleable. This is our best foot forward and allow us to be able to address it the best that we can and then move forward from there. And
What is
we
the
hope that
process for getting the certification?
process for the certification
What
would,
does the homeowner have to do?
yeah, we will likely post a link. We're trying to find a technological answer to that, as far as like maybe going on and filling out a form, going onto the web and filling out a form to the village website or what have you, or come into our offices and fill out a form manually and request an assessment by one of our personnel. They would go out to your property and make an assessment and look at a checklist and apply your property to that checklist, and then give you some feedback and give you some time to be able to do that. And whenever you're ready for that, give us a call back and we'll come back out and do a reassessment. Everybody here is ready to volunteer and help us with that project. We'll be needing a lot of help as far as the reassessments. But once you do a reassessment, we would just give a final determination if maybe you need to work on a few more things. But hopefully everything would be spelled out in that first assessment to tell you what you need to work on. And then as long as it meets all the provisions that we requested, we would give you a certificate shortly after. Yes, sir.
How do resort-owned lots, vacant lots, fit into this ordinance?
That's a great question and a point of contention with our meetings, frankly. I think the biggest concern that the fire department has is if we were to include all vacant lots, then that would imply that we would have much more slash to contend with, and I don't know that we're ready to deal with that amount of slash. It would probably increase it by at least 6 or 7-fold, some estimates up to 10-fold. So we're not ready to process that yet.
Let me rephrase, how about resort-owned lots vacant next to existing residents that have already thinned their lots?
Yeah, we're starting off and focusing mainly on lots with structures on them. If we get any amount of compliance there, we will be better for that effort. So we're gonna focus there first. In the phases that we have laid out, we would address vacant lots afterwards. We use some terminology in there that would be very similar to what you would find in a legal description for purchasing the land, and that would be improved versus unimproved. Improved would have utilities, unimproved no utilities, and developed and undeveloped. So developed would have a structure on it and undeveloped would not. So we would approach it, we recognize the need for all of that, and we are trying to take small bites at a time, and we feel like a bite that we can take today by passing this ordinance is by addressing lots with homes on them right now, and start there, and then work towards these later phases and start talks about thinning lots that don't have structures on them.
Thank you.
I would add that we do encourage people to thin vacant lots. We're not discouraging that by any means. And I think something that needs to be pointed out too, that while the resort does own a lot of the vacant lots in the resort, the majority of them are owned privately. So it would, when we do shift, again, we're trying to target a phased plan. Number one, just to get compliance rates to the point to where we can keep or get home insurance in the valley.
Mr. Mann?
Yeah, the defensible space ordinance, is it intended to include the 3-phase prefatory comments, or is it only going to begin with purpose section 1?
Can you rephrase the question? I'm not sure.
In the packet, you had phase 1 through 3, which you described in the beginning. Is that intended to be part and parcel of the ordinance that you are intending to send to council at the next meeting? Or will it only include what started on, I think, page 49 of the packet? So in other words, this page, is that the beginning of the ordinance?
Will your project outline pages be adopted, I think is the question he's asking, as part of the ordinance or not?
Yeah, so, I was thrown off by the number 49.
Sure.
I didn't see that. So,
Sure.
I'll try to address that and hopefully I answer your question, if not restate it. I hadn't thought that far ahead as far as what phases 2 and 3 will include, other than what's written in the phases 2 and 3. For the defensible space ordinance that we intend to pass today, everything that is in the packet with the defensible space ordinance would be included. Anything else, as far as like vacant lots and everything like this gentleman brought up, would be in a separate policy, maybe incorporated, but it would have to be voted into the DSO as a change of ordinance, or maybe a new ordinance of its own. But everything that you have in that packet is intended to be included in this defensible space ordinance for that first phase 1 today.
Okay, so the ordinance does include language related to adjacent lots that may be within the home ignition zone, but are off of the property owner where the structure is located.
Understood.
So that's in phase 1. So my question, which Jake and I both, I'm not getting the question out very well. In the packet that was sent and was posted, there is that 1 through 3 phasing. And I'm simply, and that comes prior to the section on.
I think I understand your question.
Yeah, so I'm just asking specifically, are we talking about just the phase 1 ordinance? Or are we saying, hey, there's phase 1, 2, and 3, and that's part of the ordinance, but here's the language for phase 1 only?
Yeah, and as
So
you know,
it's sort of a, are we backdooring phase 2 and 3 to council?
Yeah.
Or is it just phase 1?
I understand your question, I think now, and keep me honest if I'm off topic, Lindsay authored the great majority of this. Our intention now is for phase 1, and so if we were to come out and assess your home, that we were looking for a defensible space ordinance, our primary concern is your home and how defensible is it towards wildfire. And your certification process is geared towards strictly that. If there are adjacent properties that have implications to your property, we don't have anything in place right now to be able to address those properties. We're hoping that one by one, maybe your neighbor gets its own defensible space, and we'll make recommendations towards them, and they get their assessment, and that is the hope. And as we get closer to our overall 100% compliance, hopefully that would be addressed. Now, if you have an adjacent lot that is vacant or whatever, that obviously would not be included in this ordinance. So more directly, we are aimed at phase 1 of this ordinance, trying to include that. And in future states, as in phase 2 and phase 3, we might have a mechanism in place that is maybe an agreement between owner A and owner B that allows you look at me and you say, hey, you never cut down your trees or anything else. Would you mind if I cut down your trees that are within my home ignition zone and sign this form? And this is an agreement between us that you'll allow me to thin on my lot. There have been a lot of recommendations that are made towards that, but right now we are not that far into it. We have been working very diligently about focusing on one lot, one home, and that defensible space as it pertains to that lot that it's on. And phase 2 and phase 3 would work on future states.
Okay, so phase 2 and phase 3 will go through the same ordinance approval process that we are now putting phase 1 to.
Yes, sir, and I'd look for guidance from members of the council and the mayor as far as if it would be a new ordinance altogether, or if it would be an adoption or addition to this ordinance.
Sure, okay, understood. Thanks, Chief.
Somebody back here had a question?
I wanted to ask.
Yes, sir.
I know that there was a fairly large grant that we've gotten, or the community in general had gotten this in. Is that part of this, or is that doesn't?
That's the Cimarron Watershed Alliance, so that is not, I'm assuming they're working within the village limits, but that is not a village thinning project.
Okay.
So that would be going
just
to
near
them.
the watershed?
No, they have property,
They are really targeting the perimeter boundary with that $10 million grant.
Okay.
And Captain Roma, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're using the fire risk assessment that was done some years ago to targetedly go in and find the places where we're most likely to have a fire come from and start creating those breaks in there. This DSO is primarily, first and foremost, crafted to allow homeowners to go fight the battle that they're having with insurance. I don't think, and this will kind of follow on to Mr. Manley's question, I don't think the DSO, as we're looking at tonight, there is no path here for a undeveloped lot to even come into compliance. That is something we would like to add with two caveats. We don't want to slow down the process of giving you homeowners a chance to go fight insurance. And we've got to go find a specification that will even make sense for undeveloped lots. In other words, we wouldn't, everything in here is built around distance to a structure. And undeveloped lots obviously don't have a structure on them. So we're going to have to go through another round of municipal writing of how do we craft an ordinance for properties that have no structure on them. And also in consideration, many of those properties are deeply in arrears and upside down financially, that we don't want to go just pile on more debt onto a property that's already $80,000 in the hole, right? That we've got to prescriptively go through this carefully so we don't trip over other problems along the way.
I'll point out that I was in favor of including vacant lots in this ordinance. And quite frankly, there's been a lot of discussion. I mean, the Fire Adaptive Committee was the only committee that this administration inherited. They've been an active committee for years, and they've been debating these very issues for years without putting out an ordinance. And we gave them this last year. The last votes ended in a tie. We're just not making, so again, with all the input and all the debate, we feel like we need to start somewhere. This isn't exactly what I wanted to see, but I think it's a starting point and something that we need to do. Mr. Ricketson?
Just a quick question, do you have a feel for how many lots have structures on them versus how many have no structures on them?
I do. Can anybody speak to the exact numbers? I have general numbers, but.
I put that spreadsheet together, but the numbers are all jumbled in my head, so I don't want to
I wanna say we have
it.
about 1,400 lots with structures on them.
It's 14 to 1,800.
That's
I
in
know
the
it's in here
right
somewhere.
ballpark, yes.
And around 6,000 lots, if I'm not mistaken, that are lots without houses on them.
Now,
But
some of those 6,000 lots are not accessible.
I disagree to your comment. You said that it won't address, address the majority of the problem. Most homes or most fires are started around homes. And so I do believe starting somewhere, we have to pick a spot. And this is the spot that we decided to eat this elephant. And we're gonna work on this one, and then we're gonna work to put the same amount of effort into the rest of it. The Cimarron watershed addressing the perimeter of the Angel Fire will work from the outside in, as I stated, and then this working from the home zones out will help, and then hopefully we can tackle the next phase, and that's everything in between. Yes.
So it's 4,166 lots total. There are 1,732 residential lots with structures, 2,434 residential lots without a structure. Now that was from the last meeting. Those are not my numbers, those are the numbers that were
And I would
stated.
point out too, Mark, and I don't know if you can clarify, but the 4,000 lots, how many of those have utilities? In other
Yeah,
words?
and that's part of it, right? And that's something that the committee struggled with, just the terminology. Improved, unimproved, developed, undeveloped. We've got to be very clear in what that means. Improved means you get a utility bill. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Right.
And then if you've developed, that means there's a structure on your, by definition, improved lot.
Yes, ma'am.
So, when you mentioned 1,400 or so structures, and you also mentioned a one-year recertification, personally, that feels very ambitious. I don't know what kind of staffing we're putting that, but I'm just wondering if something like a 2-year or a 3-year certification every 2 years or 3 years, number one would be more doable, and number two, so that you can get to a lot of the houses, and then number two would be, what would the insurance company deem adequate enough to insure with?
Yeah,
So-
kind of a multi-part question there. What kind of staffing have we looked at? Ms. Reed was hired on a grant, and she is focused on that alone. So I agree with you. If all 1,400 or 1,700 residents asked us for an inspection, I think have a lot to deal with, and we'd have to address that as it comes along. She is coordinating some projects now where we're gonna get some volunteers and hopefully get those people trained up. We do have multiple people within the fire department who will be able to do those assessments as well as the wildland fire team, excuse me. As far as a 2-year, as I stated earlier, we are open to that as well. If we get 1 year into it and we get all 1,700 people that say, hey, we all want that assessment and it's too much for us, then we'll have to address that problem. And that might be initially to go to a 2-year period, because that would lessen the load by 50%. That being said, based on the number of fire permits that we get per year, as far as people burning slash and things like that, now we base those estimates on those numbers, and they weren't anywhere close to that, so we have to brace for impact and see what, how many permits or requests that we get, and just make adjustments from there on. If it's too much for us to handle, then I might be back in front of the public asking for more staff to be able to accommodate that.
Chief, I know I want to be mindful of time, but I've been asked this question several times. So in the draft, in 4.4A, just the beginning, property owners are required to maintain only the portion of the DS zone that falls on their property.
Home ignition zone,
yeah. Yeah, and so I think that is an issue. I know it's an issue at my house. The one right next door is within the home ignition zone, but the lot hasn't been touched in 40 years. I think one of the things that would be useful, because I've gotten this question 3 or 4 different times from different people asked in different ways, we should try to make it more clear than it is currently in this draft, that that you're responsible for what's within your property boundary, where your home sits. The home ignition zone, if you look at the pictures, they're arcs, and they go out and around from the structure, and go much further out than a standard resort lot, a 1-acre lot. Will homeowners be able to get a certification even if the home ignition zone is clean on their property, but a mess out as soon as you step across the property boundary?
Yes.
Okay, that's...
Yeah. We don't want adjacent lots to be able to affect your ability to be able to get that. We can't impose that now, and I think in future states, when we get phase 2 and phase 3, and we get lots without structures, undeveloped lots, and so forth into that, we'll be able to force those lots into compliance at some point, or encourage compliance at some point, forgive my language, but I think that'll be addressed. But you won't be delayed or held accountable for the lots next to you if they're not in compliance.
Okay.
Any feedback on that, or would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the past 2 years, I've done 400 structure assessments, and I think the majority were like moderate to low complexity in terms of wildfire risk. And that's in line with what Councilmember Crane was saying earlier about the fire document. That fire document was actually our CWPP, our Community Wildfire Protection Plan. So we're basing off of all these DSOs, and all our regulations are planning a prevention on that, document. And then Lindsay and myself are actually going to meet next week to see where we could get more funding from, because we do recognize there's going to be an uptick in our assessments. And right now we have 8 wildland personnel, and we're trying our best to do that. But we see the increase of slash coming in, so we're planning that. We're working with the council and the mayor and the manager on that as well. So I don't think it's going to be a real issue. And did you want me to kind of talk about the fire-wise kind of certification?
No, that's okay. Unless we have any specific questions about that, that is another consideration for up for. But I wanted to also speak to the point of our checklist that we have. There are certain things, it's basically a point rating system, and so if everything was taken care of for in a particular lot, and I think like worst case scenario that I can imagine is maybe, are there any 1/4 acre lots that you know of that have, there are some half-acre lots for sure, several half-acre lots with structures that are near that property. If everything else was done on that list, on that checklist, the number of points that would be detracted away from your home assessment due to something wrong on the property line next to you would likely not affect you in a way that would cause you to fail. And then we would just be able to discuss options. Like, we literally could beat this horse to death as far as
We have
examples,
for the
and
last 2
we
years.
have, trust me, everything has come up. But another thing that I'd like to mention that, in this DSO, that part of the reason that we didn't go into the vacant lots and so forth is because there are so many standards out there. And Lindsay has done an incredible effort at tying every single one of these statements back to an NFPA document or to another document that has already been tried and true and been tested, so.
So I'll point out, after the committee having numerous debates over the last couple of years, and basically just the debate not ending after a tie, more or less, what I'm accepting as well is the advice of the professionals at this point, Chief Vance, Captain Romo, Lindsay, with the help of professional foresters as well, to make this the first step in a long-term plan for Angel Fire.
And I guess the last thing that I'll close with is we'll put the same kind of dedication and effort towards working towards those next phases of the DSO to be able to address vacant lots and those with utility bills and those with
And
not.
that's just it too, with this passing, then the committee can then start focusing on phase 2 and have a clear path on the discussion for that. But we need to start somewhere, and I hope that the council will agree that this is it.
So it's not the be-all, end-all, it's not the perfect document, but it's a good place to start and it's a nice foothold.
Did anybody else have any questions? We've got a council meeting in 12 minutes. I'd like to take a short break.
I think if we could have people play.
Let's go play for This work session is adjourned.
Recording stopped.